everyone! Today, for my 50th video, I'm going to be showing you how to make this princess dress and crown for a stuffed animal. Thank you to a viewer out there named Paris for suggesting this. Now let's get started! For this video, I actually have a special guest here. This is my cousin's Build-A-Bear, Coco. She wanted to be featured in this video, so I'm going to be making the princess dress for her today. The two fabrics I'm going to be using today is just a plain cotton pink fabric and some pink tulle. I'm going to start by using this normal pink fabric for the top of the dress. All of the printable pattern for this linked down below, but this will be the only one since all the other pieces are these massive rectangles of tulle, so I'm just going to list the measurements for those down below. So right now I've just pinned my pattern on and now I'm cutting it out. Next I need to start hemming around the sides and top of this piece. I folded over one of the sides twice since the Velcro isn't going to go over this one and I want it to look a little bit neater. And you'll notice my piece has some folds in it, but you won't notice that in the end. Now I'm making some shortcuts around these curves just so I can fold it over a little easier. Next time I would try to do a better job maintaining this curve because at the time I didn't think you would really notice it, but in the end you do notice it, so try to get this part as neat as possible and get it to the shape you want. Once everything's done, I'm going to do a straight stitch all around where I've pinned. Next I'm going to start adding one side of the Velcro. That's going to be on the bad side of the fabric. Since I'm later going to be adding some tulle to the outside of this fabric, I don't want to do that other Velcro yet. So I'm just laying this on the side that I did not fold over twice. And to sew this on, I'm going to do a straight stitch around the entire perimeter of this rectangle of Velcro. Even though this isn't finished yet, I'm going to set this aside and start working on the skirt. For that, I bought 3 yards of pink tulle, and you really probably only need 2 yards, but luckily it's pretty cheap. I'm first going to cut out 2 rectangles of this that are 35 by 16 inches long. And since I was first just testing this out, I only have 1 rectangle here, but you'll want to lay the 2 rectangles together and then fold it in half along the shorter side. And at first I used a bobby pin to mark where that center point is because we're basically going to be sewing right along there with this unfolded. I kind of just ended up eyeballing where the middle was and sewing straight along there, and the important thing is to not lock your stitch on one of the sides. So after sewing, it should look like this. You've just sewn a straight line right down the middle. And now I'm going to take the end that I didn't lock and just grab one of those threads and start pulling it. The tulle will start gathering around it and you'll just want to push those ruffles down to the other end. And you basically want the top of this skirt to be the same length as the top of your dress. So I would grab that piece and just compare them like that, but here I just measured mine. Once you have the length you want, you can grab those 2 ends of thread that weren't locked and just tie them in a knot a few times, and this will just lock in that length so it doesn't change. After that, I just repeated those same steps 2 more times. You can do this only 1 more time if you want, but doing it the way I did, I got 10 layers of tulle in the end. At this point, I basically have 3 separate skirts that I want to sew together before sewing onto the top, just to make things easier for me. To do this, I'm stacking them, then grabbing my needle and thread and inserting the needle through one side. Don't bother tying a knot through the end of this thread though, because it will just go through all the holes in the tulle anyway. So what I do is pull it almost all the way through, leaving a little tail, and then tie that short end with the long end connected to the needle, and you have kind of locked your stitch in the beginning, and then you can just trim off that extra thread. Now I can start sewing these all together. I'm just going to continually insert my needle in through the back, and that means the thread will kind of go over the top. This was just the fastest and easiest way I thought of doing this, and you can even space them far apart so it doesn't take too long. You could also do this using a sewing machine, but I wanted it to be super close to the edge so the ruffles didn't get flattened or anything, because we're also going to be attaching this to the top later. This also doesn't have to be super tight or neat since you won't be able to see it in the end. After that, the skirt is basically finished, but I have some pieces sticking out, so I'm going in with scissors to even them out. This is because I kind of had to eyeball where I was sewing down the middle, so once I folded it in half, some weren't perfectly even, but that's okay. This skirt is pretty long, so you can always trim off whatever extra you need. And now that the skirt's done, I'm going to jump back to working on the top. I cut out another rectangle of tulle that was about 40 inches by 5 inches, and I'm going to line this up with the side of the top and just kind of start folding it little by little so it's kind of pleated, I guess. But you kind of just want the folds going straight across, and after I've done that, I'm just going to pin it a little bit. And you can do all this folding and pinning right now, but I'm just going to start doing a straight stitch along this bottom edge right now and then fold as I go. By the time everything's all folded, the tulle and the fabric should be the same length. Here's how mine looked after. As you can see, I was not sewing very straight, so I had a ton of extra on the bottom, but that's okay, I'm just going to cut it off. And luckily, I have a big enough piece that it fully covers the top, which is what you want. Next, I need to sew the top of this tulle down, so I'm going to be doing a straight stitch along the top. And make sure not to stretch your tool at all as you're doing this, because that's what happened with mine and it got a little bit wavy. But I just added something later that would help with that. And now I'm just trimming off the top, following the shape of that original piece. Now we can finally sew on the other side of the Velcro to this more ruffled side of the top. I'm just doing the same thing as last time, sewing around the perimeter of the rectangle. After that, it's finally time to connect the top to the skirt. So I'm just going to lay them good side to good side and start pinning them together. I'm just going to use a straight stitch to connect them, and I try to sew as close to the top edge of the skirt as possible so I don't flatten the ruffles too much. I was originally going to stop here, but since the tool was kind of pulling down on this top edge, I decided to sew on some tiny beads to really secure the tool to the fabric in the middle. This is optional, but I think it turned out so beautiful in the end, so I'm glad I did this. All I'm doing is inserting my needle through the back where I want the bead to be, then adding that bead to the needle and thread, and then I'm just going to go really close to where I inserted my needle and then pull it through the back, and that pretty much secures it, but I'm going to go through the whole of the bead one more time to make sure it's really on there. And after that, you can lock your stitch in the back and then just cut off the thread, or keep going to the place where you want your next bead to be and just lock it at the very end. But this way was a little bit neater, so I just locked my stitch after every single bead. And then I just did this for all the beads I wanted. I also started putting Amazon links in the description box for almost all the materials I'm using to make this dress. I didn't buy all the materials I'm using here from Amazon, but if you wanted to buy any of these materials, I'll have them linked down below. After I'm done adding the beads, I'm going to move on to the sleeves. I'm just loosely rolling up an 8 by 9 inch piece of tulle, and after it's kind of folded, it should be 8 inches long and about 3 inches wide. Now I'm just going in with the needle and thread and doing a running stitch along this short side, going through all the layers. Of course, make sure to lock it the way I showed before. But now I'm just moving my needle in and out of the fabric, and I'm just letting it gather on my needle first and then pulling it all the way through. And then I'm just going to do that till I get to the other side and just pull it very tightly. Now I've already tried the dress on and attached the other sleeve, but I like to do this while the dress is on so you know exactly where to put it. I'm just tucking the end of the sleeve on the inside of the fabric and sewing it on like that. Once you've got the placement down though, you can just remove the dress. Now I'm going to continue sewing this on with a few short stitches to fully secure this. After that, I can tie off my thread and put this back on my stuffed animal so I know where the other strap should end and how long it should be. You'll want to check where you want the strap to tuck in the back, and that's where you can start your running stitch like I showed before. And be warned, this piece of tulle might be longer than you want the strap to be in the end, so do not just do the running stitch at the very end like I did. I had to redo mine, but once that's done, I just sewed that onto the top of the dress. Now, after all that hard work, the dress is finally done and I can do the final try on. I think it turned out super adorable, but there's one thing I think it needs to turn it from kind of a prom dress to a princess dress, and that is obviously a crown. This should hopefully be pretty fast. All I'm going to do is grab my pattern, which I'll have linked in the description box, and I'm going to trace this on some thin cardboard. Don't worry about those random lines on there, they are not needed. But after cutting this out, I'm going to paint both sides of this gold. You could also do silver. But after that's dry, I'm going to grab some little plastic gems, and yes, that was stored in my stuffed animal shoe. But I just have a bunch of different shapes, so I'm going in with some white glue and just gluing them on. I definitely tried out different designs on the template before doing this and just took pictures of the ones I liked, so I'd recommend doing that so you're not figuring it out and gluing as you go. With mine, I kind of ended up shoving as many jewels on here as possible, but you can just use whatever you have or even just leave it plain gold like this. That would still look really pretty. And after I've glued on all my gems, I'm just going to let this dry. Now the last thing I'm going to do is attach a wire to this using hot glue. If you don't have wire, you can just make the ends of this crown really long and then just wrap it around the back of their head and just tape it close, and that will work too. But since I had wire, I'm just going to use it. And make sure to be very careful when hot gluing down wire. Since it's metal, it's going to get hot immediately, so just be careful of that. I actually don't think hot glue sticks to metal very easily, so I'd recommend using a different kind of glue. But for my ends that kept attaching, I just started wrapping this with thread, and that really secured them. Now I just need to glue the rest of that wire down. After that, I kind of just bent this into the shape of my stuffed animal's head, and you can also adjust it once you put it on. So here's the final look put together. I think the crown turned out beautiful. And now I can just put this on, and now she fully looks like a princess. I hope you like this final outfit and video, especially if you're someone who requested this. At first, I was really intimidated to make this, but am really happy with how it turned out, and I hope my cousin likes it. Please like this video and comment any video requests you have. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel to see more stuffed animal clothes and crafts. I'll see you next time!